Hello everyone, a bit of a self-promotional video today, which I hardly ever make, as you know, but rather a definition of our objectives and goals and how to pursue and achieve them, given the relevance that Schwerpunkt has assumed by a certain degree, if anything, all the stuff that I put out, and especially the important coming back that there has been in the last months, and that I foresee statistically, like in the other years, to increase dramatically, given the base that we have achieved, especially. But in autumn seasonally there is a cyclicity that for us to mind where this channel is heading. Given that I need your support to make it happen, and I ask this, as you know, at every video ending by the, please share and subscribe, whatever. And I hardly spent any time explaining, say, what's the deal here and how to do it sometimes, which I realize even subscribers full of good faith sometimes don't consider, because they watch other content and they simply say, why should I follow this channel, if anything, or not. I made a video recently explaining what happened in the last year that has seen, for technical reasons that, however, are finishing to be absorbed by the algorithm, and so that's what the stats suggest, as I was just saying. And the channel gains consensus, right? I see it. I have a higher watch length, a much higher watch length than the average on YouTube, in part for the obvious reason that I make longer videos, but I also have a high engagement rate as well. That is to say, when people come across my content, they, generally speaking, subscribe more frequently, much more frequently than the average. Again, it's because of the particular type of content that even if it's not just the the clickbaiting stuff, and or I mean, just look at this video. It can't be a clickbait from the thumbnail and all, but I will probably bombard you with a lot of useful information regarding the channel. If you follow regularly, as I see you do, this is all to the benefit of both, and this is the point of it all, right? I would be here even if I had just one person following. And this is what I said since the very beginning of Schwerpunkt, that I wasn't doing it because of just, of course, the potential of what this thing could become, but for a broader purpose, without which there wouldn't be any point to this all, right? And this is what we tend to forget, that in order to achieve something, we have to accept sacrifice by a certain degree, right? I've been doing this for a long time, as you know, every day. I haven't been sacrificing actually much of what I would have done otherwise, because I think that I'm good at wasting my time if I don't fill it with activities, and it's become a custom to me, and I have had a dramatic improvement at many levels of my knowledge, my understanding. In part, even if you probably disagree about that, even linguistical skills, but I can assure you that that did happen, as you can also hear when you listen to the re-uploads, that every once in a while I try to sneak into in the rest of the content, just for you to skip, hopefully, because there was a time in which I spoke consistently worse, and also the video presentation in general was much worse as well than today's. I still receive advice regarding you could organize this better, and there is always something to improve, and I think Schwerpunkt proved that in the positive way. That is to say, we have gone and come this far, also thanks to my work, your support, to make something that I see, again, people subscribe to because for some reason they think it's relevant, right? And my long-term strategy, I think, is finally paying off, because again, the acceleration of the channel has been exponential, given the normal trends that you find on YouTube, and the general topics that I covered are also relatively niche, and you don't see it perhaps too much right now, but that's exactly the point. Creating a wide net of videos that at the end of the day will unify as a single wall, right? And this is obviously not evident when I started at the beginning making videos that were very specific about so many different things across time and space. But now, these things, especially through the playlists, by the way, that I realize from the comments very often you ignore, is instead gaining momentum because of the systematicity of it, because of the solidity of its core that cannot but keep consolidating statistically. And I've, again, been seeing it for a long time. Everything went, in a sense, in the way I was expecting, and that's why I'm making this video now. Turning the tide of attrition, of friction, of chaos in a way to make order, right? To establish a hierarchy, to offer a reference, an orientation, something for which I see many, especially the young audience, is terribly hungry of, right? Most of the things I discuss, and especially when I get a bit into the theoretical side of the story, and we will come back with that soon, spark great surprise, amazement. When I read from the comments, say, well, that people ask me, what should I think? How do I see how life should go? Or people who write me privately. There is also a lot of kind of, in fact, disorientation and confusion. And I know that because I make my videos with a very specific aim of providing with that model and that reliability that people can read history through in an effective and consistent way. And there is an enormous disorientation, if anything, because of all the problems that we discuss every day in the videos, and that I think are very often, perhaps even too often, the main reason why my content is watched, right? That people don't really have a specific interest, or sometimes not even understanding of the historical relevance of the topics that are presented. You just think that I'm some kind of weird guy that speaks about, strangely detailed, specific, and, obscure things. And it's very difficult, of course, in today's cultural and educational temper to even create that connection with the broader mass, right? And I do think that, in fact, Schwerpunkt audience is already quite selected, is already quite, aristocratic in nature, kind of somewhat elite. But you shouldn't be flattered by that. Right? That's just a relative statement on the base of the average that you can find elsewhere, right? And in fact, probably I will also make video criticism of other channels, of other content, because not to gain notoriety, but because I don't know any of the I don't follow any channel, right? It just come across very often kind of let's say suggested videos. This is what YouTube does, and where we have to regain most of the algorithm that would make, again, the channel skyrocket after the uploads of last year. That just from the thumbnail, just from the clickbait, of course, and the general references and the very first few things you can listen, even if you listen to them for 10 seconds, get the entire thing wrong. That is to say, there is an enormous amount of content uploaded on YouTube, as you know, and historically wise, most of this is being designed mostly in a marketing fashion, right? Everything, I have nothing against the market and free market especially, and so I do believe that Schwerpunkt has something that this content does not have that is better. But the philosophy is different, right? These people want to cash immediately, right? Because they probably think that, I don't know what's behind them, but what's behind their teams, what's their purpose, whatever. But they are fishing, of course, among let's say, the fear of people, the ignorance of people, the paranoia of people, the conspiracy of people, right? That is exponentially rising, also because of the fact of the emotional, let's say, bait that this content contributes to fuel, right? In other words, always acting a bit shadily, saying, we often think something like that, but it's not really true. Well, I do that too, as you know, but I actually get the right explanation for you to the point you can expand dramatically into it. What these explanations actually are, another content is rather, still basically saying nothing, most of the times not even explaining anything. But let's say providing with essentially fake answers, or answers that want to fish further into people's prejudice, ignorance, incompetence, and making them feel as if they want anything, whereas they're just being exploited and manipulated, because that's where it gets down to. And it's very common, especially to look at exactly that content that tells you, look, you've always thought in a certain way, but here's the simple explanation, like, big historical problems explained like in 15 minutes, right? Even if there were anyone speaking the best English, providing with the most insightful explanations, etc., we all know very well from psychology, from education, from just behavioral patterns, that people are not going to understand that. Right? People do not have the tools to essentially criticize autonomously anything, and instead they make them believe they can. And this is the worst disservice, in fact, you can make to anyone, right? The reason why I talk a lot, and people have learned not to complain about, aside from the fact that I improved my language skills, and that definitely contributed to the thing, is that I make points that are to be followed and to be digested over a long time, that they are part of a much more complex pattern that very often, again, for the person that just stumbles my videos and listens to the first 5 minutes, will never be gotten. And that's the point, right? I need to make people listen more often, because the more they do, and I read it from the stats, the more they stick to it. Right, this is not just a coincidence that just the people who stick are the ones that are more interested. This is exactly the behavioral pattern, and we know that. And for that, of course, if you have a specific interest in what I do, and again, I will keep doing this independently from this, but if you have an interest in making this thing grow to a point where we can also bring it to a next level, right, which can be a lot of things, frankly, and I will not abandon the channel, right? I may be involved in other activities. I still, as you know, have my scientific production. I do other things in my life, but at the same time, this has become consistently important, and it can keep being important, right? This is not just a random YouTube channel. The same YouTube at that point could easily decline, even soon in theory, but that's unlikely. But again, that's the market. That's where you have to take risks. I have all my content saved, so in any case, I could render it accessible anywhere. But this thing will not go down anyway, especially now that we fix all the possible, say, potential copyright nuisances, right? That would have probably not struck the channel anyway. But I took measures so that this thing now is safe to the fullest. Well, we have a very powerful tool. Now we surpassed the 6,000, and I didn't make an update about that because I usually make the video update of the channel normally. Well, not actually in the base of subscriptions, but normally I thank you enormously for this. And in fact, this whole thing could not be possible without you in the first place, meaning that the more you watch and the more other people watch, this is the point, right? So this is not flattering anyone. This is exactly knowing what is going on. You know what I'm doing. I know what you're doing. And this is done not just for us, but for the rest, right? This takes many forms, and it's obvious that things I say at a point, and I know because, again, of the aforementioned messages do affect people. Someone wrote me, for example, saying things like, I don't know, thanks to you, I went to another country studying history. And I changed my life, or thanks for what you do when you say, or asking for advice, and you realize that this is, never about asking me a very specific historical issue. It's just having, what do you think about this thing in general? And this is very interesting because it does reflect the type of content that I do. That is very specific in many ways, but I managed to connect it to the whole and to a comprehensive view. And I strongly feel for this because that's exactly the opposite that I see in the academia, where I come from myself. So I've seen it all before. I know what's the mechanism behind that. It's not really a scam. It's much worse than that. Like, it's the loss of awareness, the dimming of knowledge within properly those who are also factually, because the rest of the people are not martyrs or heroes or protagonists in this. On the contrary, and that's the real problem. What we used to appreciate morally, scientifically, which is, again, not digging back into some kind of, just once upon a time, or, just a specific political side or another. This is properly a huge human issue that we have been measuring civilizationally and historically, in fact, and that can be explained only through this kind of approach to history, in my opinion. Right, I could spend all the time for Schwerpunkt by just, doubling or tripling my scientific production. It wouldn't happen like that because, unfortunately, it's not just, quantity that matters, but quality, and also accumulation of too much similar activities over time. It's not useful. You know better because training in military history shows that dramatically, that at some point you have to stop training and to start doing other things. And that's why, including actually getting out there in the wild, and Schwerpunkt provides me with an important amount. It's basically no pressure whatsoever. Like, just, making the videos sometimes is, I wonder about. It keeps me awake, and with 6,000 subscribers, I don't feel any form of of pressure, and therefore not even anything close to something resembling, difficulty or intolerability. And I plan, again, to take this really to the next level and beyond in the process. And this is why I think that this channel has a shot in the first place, because the kind of things I say objectively are not to be found anywhere. There are other good channels that make history, especially the ones now that are like the big corporations, right? Big channels with teams with a lot of marketing and cash, etc. And they make specific content. Very often is also clickbaiting, right? But at least they do say something as well. Sometimes they're hours-long documentaries, but once they do that, they're done, right? That with and they're usually topics that they can't go even very much in depth, but they even in there they're aimed at reaching a very specific and relatively generic type of audience that may be, let's say, brought surely to learn more from that experience, but that, in my opinion, from a strictly methodological point of view, and morally and scientifically, is not probably the best one, right? My capacity of that I discovered, and I didn't know I had before starting this, of speaking over and over and over about certain topics, and every time actually coming up with something better and more, again, comprehensive, and showing kind of the full extent of how far things can go, historically speaking, in depth, is, again, something you will not find in that kind of presentation, because it's just like more, let's say, encyclopedical, but for that one-time consumption. My content evolves like a sort of blob that the more, the more swallows and the bigger it becomes, and the more it can eat fundamentally out. And this, maybe that's a bad metaphor because it's kind of a monstrous one, but in many ways I see that aggregative capacity of the channel is starting to manifest itself, and that is entirely moved by you. Many people break their head over YouTube's algorithm, and I could even make a video about how it works and how I easily see it does, right? I don't have the maths of it because only YouTube has, but it's very easy to see how it really works. And there are some things that are objectively, not everything is so natural and fair of how this algorithm works, but at the same time, it is put in motion by people, right? So it's always about your own capacity of convincing the audience that this is worth watching and sharing and liking, and properly trying to understand by listening to it carefully, especially in this case. And therefore I plan also something bigger, right? I do see also what fundamentally you like, and the trends regarding certain topics. It can be just sometimes the divide between kind of basic history or history of religions or military history, this kind of divides. Sometimes it's more country-based, even ethnically based. Sometimes it's just the era, frankly. And there are very interesting things that are emerging, and I actually know what would make more views myself, but I'm still not doing it again because I believe as a long-term investment that is riskier for sure, but I think it's more profitable, in fact, on the long run. And this is, again, I have no data countering this. If anything, the contrary, as I can evidence from the stats, to cement orderly, completely, with a specific method and way, right, of doing the whole thing. That helps also consolidating effectively the general consumption effectiveness from the side of the audience, because you also influence one another, as a matter of fact, and sometimes I do have to keep you in line through things I say. That when I see, for example, there is a specific topic that gets more views, and the comments very attached to that say things that really go astray from the whole point for reasons that I obviously understand, and that, however, I don't condone, because the same videos sometimes are watched just because people project on this huge content whatever they think what I'm saying, not what I'm actually saying, right? There are two different things, and that's why there is also a hierarchy, right, of the good, followers that really get what I'm saying, and I think the majority does really, right, and especially the silent majority. And another one that is appreciative, but very often you understand that tries to maybe even to push me towards a certain direction, which is not even entirely, like, it's not even just a political thing. At least they would think it's a political thing, and everything is political in many ways, but it goes, say, far beyond what I'm doing here, and far beyond what is contained in the same videos, right? And that's why today what I actually want to tell you is, maybe I will make another video to be even more specific about that, but is exactly how to consume this content. Because I realize it's not easy. So I'm not going to tell you how you have to listen to it, where, how. I don't care. You'll have your own way. And I appreciate that sometimes people write me, I will listen to this in the car while I'm driving, from a state to another, or I don't know. I see even the devices through which they're watched. Many of you listen to me from television. That's kind of interesting. And many other ways. And so that's up to you. The point about the content, though, is realizing first and foremost that, again, at least starting from the single video, that first of all, everything I say is interconnected, right? And deeply so, right? The reason why I make such long videos and why they seem messy, apparently, right? And there are people who have come back say at the beginning, oh, I can stand the way you explain things, it's chaotic, whatever. Then over time you said, I'm starting to get the thing. I realize now better. And so again, it takes some cultivation, it takes some time dedicated to it, and a few. It's not really like I'm very straightforward. Like I talk a lot, which I actually don't do in real life, and part of the reason I concentrate this in the videos is because actually humans have a certain amount of words that they have to tell during the day. Women more, men less. But especially when you don't speak the whole day long, this can sound overwhelming, right? But I get always to the point. Like I don't roam around. I hope I don't loop. Sometimes I repeat myself, of course, because I think that repetita juvent, as the Latins said. But it's strategically meant, right? It's not because I'm lazy and I like to. Consider that I have an audience that doesn't really follow homogeneously all the content. So I want to make sure that everybody gets the thing. And that's also why I say, for example, I already made this video, this other video, because the second point there is that not only everything I say in a given video is interconnected with the wall in the video, but it's also interconnected with all what I've been saying. Ideally, and of course I can't force you to do that as for anything, but it's obvious that as it happened very rarely, there is any form of kind of bitter criticism by people, again, that are mostly, you understand, ideologized, and they don't like what I say because it destroys their doctrine. And I'm specifically talking about the far left and far right, but let's say I don't believe there is really like even a division between far and whatever, right? We all are more or less oriented towards a certain direction. You know that I lean definitely towards the right, but very often I'm, the most bitter criticism I get is from what I think, in fact, has nothing to do with the right. That is the old right, that just by name means it's not right, and it's actual National Socialism, and that do not appreciate, for example, certain concepts like the one of the imperial universal tradition, because they're essentially a bunch of statalist collectivists that were born out of the destruction of European tradition after the revolutions, and they still don't get that being right wing means to be elite, not to be scum, right? And which is for ethno-populists something extremely difficult to understand, if anything, because they hardly can do it without any cultural and educational tooling in the first place. But this is exactly the point. These are the people against which I like to be harsher. I think I have leftists here, and I got some communists pissed off, and people also of course I believe the full pack that gender theory does not exist. Gender does not exist. Only and exclusively sex exists, and get over that. Also, the rest is just a personal opinion, and frankly, nobody should give a damn about personal opinions, especially when they're worthless. The saying goes for critical race theory and all this bullshit. This is pure. It's pure communism at the end of the day, because the actual step into, like, also ethno-nationalism is a step into communism, right? It completely goes in the opposite direction from the traditional one. That is ultra elite. It's the most brutal thing that you have ever listened to, but it has nothing to do with, Judenhass and, in fact, thinking that, the Nazis were actually the good side during World War II. Yes, the Soviets were a bunch of, animals, and this is absolutely obvious. But the point is that this doesn't excuse what the Nazis did, nor the fact that, yes, of course, the Western allies were, in many cases, a bunch of racists, and there was really no perfect guy from any side. Doesn't absolutely obscure what seemingly some people today do not realize that is the radical superiority of Western civilization. That is not, unfortunately, what most right-wingers actually understand it to be, because again, they are fourth estaters, and Western civilization and European tradition is solely founded in ultra-elitism and massive individual superiority, which is by default what the average person today cannot afford even to conceive anymore, because it lacks completely any tool. There is no tradition that conservatives fundamentally understand today. Coming from a conservative background doesn't mean to know what, again, the universal tradition really was about, because at this point historically, you can get some sense, some feeling of it, but it must be explained and known, right? And that specific knowledge is not available. It's not available in the families, even the most ultra-conservative ones. It's not available in the educational institutions. It's not available. It would be available just, visiting a library and starting to study history for a lifetime. But again, that's what the average person cannot afford, because the fourth estater cannot afford that. And so knowledge is there. It can't be learned and studied. I'm not the only one actually providing you with this, or at least potentially. I don't know anyone that makes the points that I do. But this, I think, there are very easy points to make if one just spends enough time and works on them, right? And so it's not an exoteric knowledge or agnostic heresy or whatever, just this guy knows the thing. No. Again, up to a few generations ago, this was normal content in academias everywhere, right? And even today, it's not that there is a conspiracy for which this thing has been censored. It's just there. It's known, right? It's just that people don't study it anymore, because the problem, as always, is the people. It's not the evil tyrants or whatever, right? There is no such thing like the power of someone controlling others without, just without that those others' consent, right? It's always the other's fault, as much as it's your fault, of course, if you do something wrong. But again, there is no mercy for anyone who lets himself dominated by a tyrant, because it's exclusively their fault in every single freaking time. So this is not anything that you can deny on the grounds of the universal tradition, because universal tradition goes as far as saying that even illnesses that you get, it's your fault, where in another, because nobody owes you anything. You have to accept your own existence for what it actually means, and what we actually live through is some sort of kind of half sleep mode that doesn't even begin to make sense of anything that is happening, and to be completely fair about that, right? So this is my my view in many ways, and so it's radical, it's brutal, and very often misunderstood, manipulated, seen. Of course, I should spend much more time teaching this, because honestly, I made, I think, just a couple of tens of videos about it, and I could easily make all the channel about it, but I won't, because if I don't teach history, it won't really be understood, right? It would take just mostly an exoteric character. And actually, even in my own personal experience, I've come to know these things later on, later in life, after I had already studied history, so that everything suddenly started to make sense, not because I read something for the first time, but because I had already connected the dots by having studied history for decades now, and this theory simply gave a form to the substance that I had collected, making sense, right? Not inventing it, not saying that I'm copying that form, but I'm realizing, just like when you study physics, that you know how physics works, more or less, because you live in the world, but until you read the formula, you don't know how to perfectly describe it, how to define it in a cogent, coherent, precise way. Well, this is exactly the point I'm making. Of course, there are different interpretations even of the traditional, let's say, intent and knowledge, etc. But this is, in fact, what only history can find an answer to. And in fact, I have also my own ideas regarding that, and with the only difference, seemingly, that I don't have my own ideas because I want to, to seem good or capable or special or whatever in front of others. It's because I want to explain others why I think that, and if it does make sense, it's also a way of validating my own knowledge, because I have discovered, again, just like with Schwerpunkt, that before speaking on here daily, I knew a lot of things, but I didn't know how to explain them well. And this is typical. It's like when you study and you kind of say, oh, well, yes, I have all in mind, and then you go to the examination and you actually know what you're talking about, but let's say there is still confusion in your mind because you haven't actually articulated a speech, a thought. And you would be surprised also. This is the nature of the logos and the verbum and the absolute and the truth in tradition. How much, in fact, that step is crucial to actually formalize this substance that is there. So I don't expect even to find any degree of understanding from certain sides. Like, I know that the world today is possessed by some crazy demonic force. If you look left and right, you see the worst, again, for the aforementioned reasons, because again, there is nothing to be proud of being an average person, and this is instead the exact opposite of what both left and right today are barking at each other. And I frankly, without doing anything, by the way, because we've talked about hatred, about this huge problems, etc., but people are actually expressing themselves like this because they are ever weaker. Right, this hatred is all kind of like a breath. It's no power. It's no force. It's something just pretending reality to be, in fact, in ways that it's not. In reality, goes on much more powerfully, much more violently, and not definitely in the way that mostly anyone wants. If they, in fact, haven't even started being capable of being able to succeed in anything. Right, and this is valid for people, for countries. For anything. And right now in the world, there is none of these groups that actually has it, not even remotely, right? And that's, again, the oversimplification of pretending that just because somebody's from one side or the other, and that's all it takes, is the greatest proof of this. Frankly, this is a personal, moral, and cultural inferiority. I got to the point that I'm not happy about what the world is heading to. Generally speaking, as a historian, I have matured at least a pretty precise idea of what is going on, and the future is not going to be particularly better, right? I'm not saying it should be disastrous, but there are many hints that really resemble much else I've seen elsewhere, and so I'm trying to understand whether, of course, there are many other connections to that, because the picture that would emerge is disconcerting. So I'm not saying that I'm actually happy about the average person becoming a slave, for example, or its equivalent, as most people already are fundamentally in the way they live, and because they want that at this point, because still they would have any resource to be the opposite of it. But at the same time, you get what you deserve, right? So that's why I also do this, because it's like, it's here I use the expression turning the tide, and it's pretty hard to turn the tide, but that's exactly the traditional standard to achieve, right? To divinely transfigure in this heroic doctrine of struggle and victory. And so if one doesn't pick that road, really, what's the point of it all, right? So that's what I'm mostly talking about when I want to motivate you. What's the reason why I'm doing this in the first place, and what's actually for you, what you may have not thought this channel is here for, and why you like it and you follow it. So how to support this tide turning? So first of all, as I was saying before, you cannot blame, we would be superstitious and therefore chthonic, demonic, Dionysian, telluric forces if we thought that there was just a big superstition, in fact, something above us, controlling us and not making it. It's just a myth. It does not exist, right? It's like a nightmare. It's our own fears and nothing else, right? So what actually will turn the tide, the first thing, is how much you want this channel to spread, right? This channel, again, I'm just a mortal, apparently, and I'm doing this hoping to make a difference, because that's how, you know, how ambitious I am. If I probably don't sound much like that, but I try to, in fact, to channel this aggressiveness simply in what I do. But it's literally, giving a voice to yourself, supporting this channel. If you think that what I'm doing is what you agree on it and want, well, supporting Schwerpunkt is giving voice to yourself, right? I will, the more subscribers I get, and the more difficult it becomes to interact with each of them. I don't have a dramatic traffic. I normally can answer everyone. It's not that I would always do it, because it depends on what they say, but and sometimes I simply maintain a decent silence. But for those who have contacted me, that I'm, if it's a positive interaction, if there is a point to the thing that can help us grow, it's happened, right? This channel has already been enriched, even in its content, frankly, by just think about the question and answer videos as the most basic thing, but even much longer interaction. I've had gifts. We've made videos about that as well. Very precious contribution, right? Priceless contribution. I wouldn't know how to quantify that, honestly. Maybe from a material point of view I would, but from a moral one, right? How much has that affected me and the channel and what I say and how this reflects on you? This is incalculable. That's why moral forces are so crucial in all this process. So the first thing you can do is, of course, to stick around. In many ways, that's the easiest way, right? But if you really want to make this thing big, there are many things you can do. The first one, I presume, even though it's very indirect and it can be even more long-term than I think, is talking about not even Schwerpunkt, but let's say the things I say, that if there is anything in particular that you appreciate about what I discuss, especially about military history, strategic culture, but also about politics, about religion, about tradition, etc. You have also an enormous choice in the aforementioned playlists. If you want to specialize your interest, I have created at this point hundreds of playlists for everyone to see, to access, so you know that all my content is there. I still have a few, not really a few, but still some video to re-upload, just you have fast image pictures, right? That's the worst that can happen, but most of my content is to be listened to in a podcast form, and the pictures really, I do realize they make a lot of difference, because I never re-listened to me, nor I watch my videos, but I remember once I did, and I was stuck. It was in I think the first year when I still made like one picture per video, and just looking at that picture was kind of hypnotizing, right? Listening to my voice and looking at that kind of historical thing. So if there are lots of images, I realize the thing becomes interesting, but it's not the images. It's all about symbols and emotions. We know that life fundamentally is about that, and reason is just our helm that navigates us through this pretty stormy journey. And there is a lot of work to do like that, but in that sense you can really access a lot. I think I have made almost 1,500 videos, which means they're not a lot. Like, from my perspective, given the topics I cover, like, I haven't even gotten started practically. Like, the amount of detail that sometimes which is not even enormous, but that I'm used to, just practically, like, consider that is has not made me cover enough, right? And consider that I say this by coming from a background that for which if I had to write an article for each of the videos, like, it would take like maybe years, not even an article, honestly, about that, because the bibliography, the amount of sources of information is enormous, right? This is what perhaps I haven't, let's say, maybe I indirectly showed you by talking so much about these things. But from some questions like, can you advise me some primary source about, some topic about, I don't know, 50 years of 14th century history? Well, there's hardly like one source you can read and say, okay, well, I've gotten the era, man. Well, it doesn't really work like that, right? It's not really that easy, and nobody really does, right? Never think that you can have got to any point, right? Except realize how much road you have walked on, and see how much effort and work and how much that disciplined you, rather than thinking that there is ever an end. And so then you will be able to get to a point, but just retrospectively, and while you're still struggling factually about the understanding history that really never ends in its complexity and complication. And this, however, in fact, has nothing to do with not being precise or thinking that somebody is scamming you, or there is a conspiracy theory that, somebody has invented a different form of history to mislead you, right? It just came to happen like that, mostly. There are people who manipulate history, it's true, but nobody can dominate thought, right? Especially of 7 billion people and the way they interact and what they do. That's if this had happened, we would live in a very different world from this one, and probably a much worse one. But this still wouldn't explain, how the thing could even sustain itself. So don't even make me digress on that topic. Just be aware of the fact that, especially certain topics that you may have never heard of, are much more important than, not just like in perspective, like, this sounds like a very niche thing, but, surely it's important in some regard, but it's still niche. No, most of the topics I discuss are macroscopically, magnitudinally, overwhelmingly, like in time and space, important, right? And I know that cultural subjectivity sometimes distorts this capacity to appreciate, but it's mostly not knowing at the time even what the thing is, because again, I am aware of the fact, I see it from the age group stats, that I have a lot of very young people following, and it's not their fault at a point, especially if they're still kids, but they simply have never been told that the world existed, and that, I don't know, even, for example, I'm planning to make a series about the 19th to the 20th century in a very basic way, but I'm talking about several tens of videos, to even, for a lot of, even words that are used nowadays, speaking of, fascism, communism, etc., you realize, I think my generation kind of had an idea of what that meant, because in a sense we still came from a world where, I don't know, our grandparents lived through World War II, we had an idea of what we were coming from after the Cold War, etc. Nowadays, even just the political, historical, cultural, and moral meaning of some words is completely manipulated by mostly an internet culture that is the only thing that kids see, and that convince themselves and pretending that's the accurate one because somebody else said it, but without even getting through an historical method. And so that's why, be careful, slow down with all this thing of the conspiracy theory, because if you haven't actually even studied history properly, or made history, meaning written it, and studied from the sources, from the evidence, and from the historiography, even if you had been fooled by someone and this was just a big scam, you're definitely not a competent person to pretend that you know how things actually went otherwise. And the thing, believe me, because I went through that, but it didn't happen with a, history is very different from what you've been told, but not because of the terrible historians or somebody paying them for misleading you, or what happened, I don't know, during World War II or whatever at some point. that's just a proof of a severe cultural underdevelopment and radical under-education, if not properly under-schooling, right? And looking at parental background, but very often is non-existent, well, you don't even actually have to go very far to explain how the thing happened. But in fact, there is hatred. There is in fact, lack of. There is hunger for authority, for reason, for command, for discipline. Just it's hard, right? If you've never been habituated to that, even just as a kid, etc., even as an adult, you will want that, but you will be too weak to get it at some point. So that's how the disaster civilizationally happens. And that's why I speak also a lot, because I presume that what I'm talking about, I don't think I say anything dramatically, high nature. Like I express myself as I can. I may say very complex things, but I'm also a very average person myself in many ways. So history is my profession, but I know better that there are ways and ways of making that profession. I also would like to be a much better historian myself. The only thing, I guess, and that I think I get rewarded for it, is that that I'm not lying to you. Like if I don't know something, I say it. If I make a mistake, I say it. If I often criticize the same things that I say myself, except doesn't mean that I'm invalidating them. I'm just correcting them and getting them on kind of a more orthodox track, morally and scientifically. But it doesn't mean the start is really important, right? And the younger you are, and the more difficult it is to point in the right direction, right? Then we all kind of converge if we develop from different paths that are all different, but there is only one truth, and so we all get closer to it our own way. It doesn't mean that getting in the opposite direction simply means your own way to get to the truth, because there is a very radically identifiable standard that tells you that two different opinions, if anything, are immediately one is better than the other. There is no way out of that. And the fact that it's difficult to prove certain ideas doesn't mean, first of all, it can't be done. And most people really don't even start, right, to get in the complexities of that and think that your reasoning at, kind of like a third grader for 50 years old is a normal thing, and there is nothing to be worried about, the cultural background from which this emerges. But it's actually easier than it seems. Like you can, in fact, if you just spend enough time and you have enough self-discipline and motivation, etc., you can easily get to the point where you understand more and better, systematically and solidly, right? And getting closer to the point. So I guess this is important for you, because I am explaining you the actual mechanism through which it happens, and it's not a scam, right? Brief parenthesis, on YouTube, it's plenty of videos of any kind, especially from psychologists at a point, and I see, that are selling you the idea that you're a victim. I'm not even talking of the aforementioned racial issues. I'm talking about, I don't know, I see now, I don't know if it's my YouTube kind of suggested video cradle, let's say, but there is a flourishing on videos on narcissism, right? Essentially, these videos are an actual scam, right? Nobody can define exactly what a narcissist is. They just make you a list of behaviors, and then they have no synthesis capacity, no comprehensive explanation of why narcissists exist or don't. They tell you, now I will explain everything to you, and then they don't. And they generate you this idea that just basically a person who has standards is a narcissist, and you're a victim and you should be free from that, what actually is the absolute chthonic demonic propaganda of our days. It is to say, you don't have any responsibility, you don't have to make any effort, you're just a victim of the system, and you have no force and no standards and no strength. Wake up. If you want to leave and you want to accomplish anything, you have to feel anger, you have to spit blood, you have to sweat tears. You have to get the freaking thing done, and it has a cost, and it's really it takes a lot of fatigue and difficulty, and you will pay for it. But if you want, again, something more, something better, you have to go through that, right? And you can't distance yourself ever more from any kind of criticism or pressure or whatever. And so to the point that you become irresistant to anything, and everybody can easily take you over. This is what happened civilizationally to many times of crisis over and over again, right? So you are entirely responsible for anything that happens to you. And thinking otherwise just basically teaches you to be weaker. So it doesn't even matter whether it's fair or not. That will have made the difference for you, and it would have been a worse one, right? So this is not that we shouldn't have mercy or compassion or helping each other. For that, there is a pretty powerful mechanism called love, which, the real one, that is for men and women to make children and raising them as dignified human beings, and not a bunch of wild animals. And if it wasn't for the fact that, unfortunately, the parents very often were raised in the same way, with all the disastrous result, and fixing the thing with some values that are connected to the same moral and scientific and historical ones we're discussing. We derive from history, right? It's not not from history as a pool of, a bag of stuff. You say, no, I pulled this out. Look, it's my knowledge. No, history is the activity, it's the method. It's like science speaking, not what, Richard Dawkins says to piss off Christians. I'm talking about actual science. I mean, the knowing actual science, showing an actual scientific method, and being an open-minded person. That doesn't mean a leftist. Open-minded means to have a massive prejudice and a correct one about the world, because you have already learned a lot of stuff of how it works, and everything you can getting to it, and that's how open you are, serves to be integrated in that system of understanding, and expanded the knowledge further, which again, leftistic science has, unfortunately, especially in some parts of the West, taken over dramatically by essentially denying even the utility of studying history at the end of the day. Because when you deny religion, I presume that you have very severe cultural problems to be denying that if anything, you are forced to study religion if you want to understand anything about the world, and not the religion that you like or wish or think that you, of course, don't understand anything of, and you will not be able to discern in that sense, but actually studying what's the point of it, and not what you have been told religion actually is, because it's full, of course, of religious people that made you think like that, because of course they were just the average fourth estaters that didn't understand anything about religion. So I'm not commending bigotry or anti-scientific thought. On the contrary, I think that science is the method that makes you arrive to the truth, and not again the bucket of prizes for initiated people to the next chthonic anti-scientific cult pretending to be clothed as science, whatever they meant that is. And there is no conspiracy theory about this either, right? I don't buy the conspiracy theories of the far right. I don't, nor the ones of the far left. I don't buy conspiracies at all, because I've been habituated as a person to always find an answer to things by actually researching into them, right? And not, flattering my own deficiencies in a identitaristic way, as again most people really seem to be doing, given that they have decided not to have other alternative, and that speaks for it all. Talking about these things is important. It takes some time, frankly. If you, again, for example, have never come across this kind of ideas, you will be probably hurt by what I say, right? I don't hear many people complaining about what I say, because, again, I take all my time to explain in detail everything, right? So I don't, you cannot escape from my criticism, because if I say something, especially in this kind of peremptory way, you can be sure that I've been thinking about it for a while. This doesn't mean that I can't change idea, but it won't be a 100% change, nor over time that amount that will change is likely to increase in relative terms, because again, I have sedimented some information that is not just wishful thinking and that I had to test in my job. So for reality to match with it. So if it you can't make it work if reality doesn't match with it, or pretend so, right? By a certain degree, it always happens, but you also learn the difference there in measure. But once you get to this point, once you get how important it is, because I think that it's basically where it all gets down to, right? As an advice, right? I can't talk to you about all the history that you want, but if I don't clothe that content with all this with this guide, it's like a guidance, right? It's like when you're taught history, you're not, right, just injected this massive load of information. You're given properly a form through which you have to interpret that, and the form can evolve, right? It's not the same, or it's not even supposed to be. So, and again, in academic culture, mostly today, this form is shrinking into something smaller and less performing, in fact, whereas the form is the order of knowledge, and the more knowledge you're able to order, right, and the better it is. And that's the actual work of it, right? You can read history for a lifetime and not understanding anything about that. I know plenty of people who do so, right? Those that always have a book in their hand and claim, I'm a great intellectual because I read, and then you ask them something about it, zero, right? Even the same things they're actually learned, they didn't understand anything. It's just like smoking a cigarette. That's it. It's just a bias and some form of exhibitionism, in my opinion. Things must be studied and known thoroughly at a quality level. And again, without history as a research and science as a method that are the same thing, you can't really achieve that, right? It's really reason, what stands between reason and truth, right, as a work. So this thing, I think, alone is the reason why the tide should be turned, if you're just wondering what I mean. Then in more concrete terms, of course, you can talk about what I say, and if somebody says, well, these are maybe interesting ideas, well, where did you learn about that? Well, you can reference me if you want. Of course, you make me a favor and say, well, there's this channel. I don't know, if you don't like history, may not be particularly interested, or this guy, sounds antipathetic sometimes, or it's heavy and it takes a lot of time, but it's here and it's doing something that can help, and it turns out that it's really a point that you don't that goes just beyond what you normally listen to, especially from a political point of view. Let's leave aside history per se. That can be really a great help. But of course, on the internet, the great potential is just you can't, without having to talk with anyone, because we're becoming a bunch of antisocial wearables. You can't simply share. I've met with people, with supporters, followers that actually started even there's a Reddit page that is being created by one of my supporters, and I want to thank him for that, because he's always been open with me, and I remember him we didn't interact much, but he's the kind of person that agrees with the objective standards, and has made this thing on Reddit. And I told him frankly that he should have not been posting there every time or making all this effort, because I don't want you to work for me. And of course he did it just for out of devotion and thankfulness, I guess, for what I do. But let's say a minimal effort is appreciated. As you know, I don't care about money, right? I have the donations activated here with PayPal, etc. But like, if you want to do that, like use, instead of sending money to me, even though some of them are scams, try those services for sharing content, right, artificially algorithmically, because that can be helpful, right? It will just make it quicker. The more we sediment in views and watch length, and the more YouTube algorithm will make the work for you. So that's why it's so easy and important, because you can do a small thing and then from there it can blossom, but it must be consistent anyhow, right? So sharing is crucial. Reddit is a very good place because there are lots of people at least on some. I don't even know exactly how it works because I've never used it. But some groups, some pages are very, very low. I don't know. Some people maybe use Facebook groups. I escaped from Facebook groups. I know it's a carnage. It's the main reason why I started Schwerpunkt, telling the truth, because I was tired of saying things that people wouldn't even understand anymore. So I began to speak up here. But those places are not so bad after all. Forums, maybe other places where people can't just have that inside, right? So that's become the most important thing. How much things are watched, just how many eyes pass on on YouTube. They call it impressions, and I have millions. There are millions of people that have come across my content at this point, but even more. I think tens of millions at this point. And so the important is how much they click on it. And you can also share playlists, saying, oh, look, because, if you share a single video, it can be interesting. You can say, well, this video is particularly interesting. I don't know, I like it for this and that reason. Check it out. Also the channel and what it does. But, I realized that many people that come across my content do not know what I've been doing here. And I see it because very often you ask me, have you made a video about this? And maybe I made 5, and I post the links and I make a bit of self-promotion in the comments as well. And they say, oh, well, thanks, but they could have known better, right? Or maybe simply they could, but it's not to say that they should have, but let's say many people ignore that. So sharing playlists when I have made, I don't know, at this point, 800, maybe less, about, however, told several hundreds anyhow, about, I don't know, medieval warfare or a specific country, whatever. People say, oh, my God, this person made all this, like, I don't know, 50 videos, if anything, about, a specific medieval European region, talking for 1-2 hours each. Like, that's, in each video, like, that's a thing, right? It can impress, I guess. So sharing, if you post on Facebook regularly, on Twitter I have just a few subscribers, because followers better, that have been rising anyhow, and Twitter is perhaps very contagious in the way it spreads. It's different and not necessarily made for sharing YouTube stuff, but let's say there just one tweet can make the content escalating at some point in views, etc. And it can happen, right? So you can definitely suggest my page, whatever, and that can't really make a difference, I'm sure. Yeah, these are normally the things I imagine in terms of sharing, really, because sharing is more powerful than it seems. It's really, I know it's more difficult, because when you share somebody's content, especially a content like mine, you're risking, because maybe in my video I say something that to someone sounds atrocious, enough to hate you eventually, because of having shared my content specifically. But I see people share everything at this point, and they make themselves hated consistently just because of the kind of content that they share. But sometimes that's still a viable way of content spreading, and so I guess it can work. The other thing that really works importantly for the algorithm is, as you understand, say YouTube's algorithm is really a mix of all the main factors. Like, it's the clicks, it's the views, as they call it, the watch length, that is arguably the most important, and the likes or dislikes. Likes and dislikes are equal. So if you want to dislike my videos, it's perfectly fine. YouTube, by the way, has since last year eliminated the this, like, you can't even set if you want to display dislikes or not. Like, you just see likes, which is kind of weird, and I don't know why they did it, but it probably made people also liking less in general, participating less to the like. So especially if there is a more divisive content, maybe, if you want to dislike, nobody's gonna see it anyway if not the creator. So that actually creates less problem. Maybe it's a way to flatten, to content people more, to make them more obedient in a way. So that may be a good reason to dislike me more or liking me. Again, it's completely equal. One like or dislike are count the same in the algorithm. But it's very important, and people generally speaking don't consider how relevant it is, right? And I noticed that whenever, for example, I make a video about the migration era, this kind of more ethnic stuff, people tend to shower me with likes. If I make something more, that it would be even more important, more interesting, but it's more like late medieval, they don't really follow me. You don't even reach the 20 likes, or you don't even click on it. Like, I have 6,000 subscribers now, and it's possible that I make a video that barely reaches 100 views, while others can rocket to 900, especially if I talk badly about the left, etc. So that's what I was saying about certain dynamics that I could exploit, but I don't. At least I don't see the point of exploiting, at least more than I do at the moment, for reasons now I won't digress on. But let's say there is a big gap, let's say, between what is just possible to do and what it's actually done. So just sympathizing for me and pretending that there's this thing, generally speaking, just know that a click, a like, doesn't hurt anyone, and on the contrary, it makes a lot in the stat. However, watch length is more important, and for this, like, you don't have to listen to me more than it's necessary, of course. And I know that I would bore myself with listening to myself, I guess. That depends on what I say, and of course there are, it happened to me in the past. Like, I listened to very few channels in my life on YouTube, and I listened to them until they gave me something. Then when I think I got to their level, I stopped watching them, right? Because I knew what to expect, in a sense. So here I say so many different strange things that I really can't go on all my life long. I doubt that I would do this, but I mean, I will never exhaust my topics. I mean, not because I will repeat them, but because also, in a sense, but always saying new things about the most different things that I'm doing. For example, when you say, "Oh my God, you made a video titled this blah blah blah," like a very short introduction, and it lasts 2 hours. Well, yeah, because to me that's an actual introduction, and it's even a very poor one to the topic. And it is very short, given the topic. So what I mean by that is that I'm just setting some bases, laying some foundations for, like, starting to talk about certain topics, so that more or less when I reference to them, you know what I'm talking about. If I make more in-depth videos, you can check those other basic ones before. But the plan is to go in depth like hell. In anything, and there are so many other topics we didn't even start, right? And these are all 1,500 videos. I could easily make 150,000 if I lived enough, which I won't. But it's inexhaustible, right? So that's why this thing is just something you want to invest in, because see it. As on the market, I'm going to do that. Like, my advantage is that I don't need anything else, right? Not aside from this. Like, literally, I do this because I do it anyway. So I won't stop. It's not that if this thing goes, slower than expected, I will stop anyway. So I will keep making videos, and at a point, my videos will be out there, will be known, will be watched, and this thing would have dramatically enlarged. So your possibility, especially at this point, to make the difference, also kind of making, I don't know, banally asking me something and me responding you in a video, and or maybe bonding with me in some way, some kind of maybe cooperation. I'm not very, I work alone just by nature. I'm not, I don't like to be, let's say, to depend on anyone. But let's say there is enough room for, at this point, strengthening the base in order to make the thing flourish much more consistently and with much greater chances of really Schwerpunkt having an impact of some relevance out there, right? So 6,000 is a few, right? But it can quickly rise, right? If you make it even overnight, like if all 6,000 subscribers, let's assume, even just paid $1 once in their entire lives for, I don't know, boosting artificially my views, tomorrow I would be just a big channel, right? It's that quick, it's that fast. So it's just on you, practically. I can, in a sense, do the same thing, but of course I'm not going to ask you that specifically. I'm just going to say that it would be that easy. Like if you every day say you like 3 videos, for example, because there's a limit. YouTube doesn't make you like more than 3 videos a day and recording the like. But let's assume all the 6,000 subscribers not even had to pay $1. They clicked like or dislike on 3 videos of mine daily. This channel would double overnight and quickly rise in a few months to very high levels, right? And so this thing must be forcefully considered if you are following, because the share, like it's not anecdotal. It's literally how the thing is done, right? It's not me talking. It must pass through that interaction to rise, right? So without that, people will just arrive anyway, but it will be much slower. Another trick that you can use, and it is somewhat weird, but it happens. Like for example, I sleep with the computer on, simply because I'm too lazy to restart it every day, and I have stuff connected to it that I have to reconnect when if I switch it off. And for example, I think you can do, I don't do it because I don't know what it does. Like even maybe my address could be spotted. If I did it repeatedly, I think YouTube would partially make me do certain things. I mean, I'm still uploading video, but maybe he wouldn't make me, I don't know, he wouldn't even register that view if I wanted to do that. I never tried, never wanted even to. But if, for example, you do something similar, or for example, you go to work or you go to university and you're used to leave the computer on for some reason, you're downloading something, it happens to me. I use peer-to-peer, to download stuff. I have other things going on. I leave certain sites open because there are many reasons, right? You can do this. You can set the brilliant idea. You can click on the Schwerpunkt Mix playlist, the longest one with all the videos, and simply opening one video and setting repeat, right, and watching all the videos, so that when you come home after, say, 8 hours, maybe 8 videos have been watched, and they figure as being watched, even with, by the way, the ads income that I'm not, making really much from, but it's still something. So you haven't done anything. You haven't consumed more energy. You can absolutely, and you should, set the screensaver, switching the simply the screen off, the speakers off, so you don't consume practically anything. And still, you simply gave me 8 hours for free, right? And that would also, like, if just 600 of my subscribers did, 1 person out of 10, say in fact, did that, I would probably boom overnight as well. So these are all things that you can so easily do, especially the latter ones. Sharing, understand, it's a bit more of our nuisance, and I also, I'm not responsible for what you share in my content, but I'm aware of the fact that my content can be somewhat controversial. However, the likes and even the watch length actually can be worked well on quite easily, and therefore I don't really think that there is anything strange or wrong about that. It could be done without any problem. This is my advice, and generally speaking, like, if you're an average follower, you can definitely just I'm glad if you are a kind of if I manage to fidelize more people, and because evidently there is also a human component. Probably you are habituated to the fact I post every day, and that I'm doing this apparently with some value, things I say, and so it can help motivating you in that regard. And so what is that I want to do if this thing grows importantly? Well, there are many things we could do. So far with this, I have just gotten a random kind of joy. I made a book review. I participated briefly, however, for a documentary production. I was asked by a certain television to be interviewed in the documentary. I refused back then. I received some. I made something right out of it as well. But in general, the thing that I earned the most was my personal knowledge, right? Of course, I made the videos, so it's slightly different from, say, just listening to them. I had to learn things before. I had to spend some time, but I can confidently say that I learned more from Schwerpunkt in absolute terms than from my doctorate in many ways. Like, the doctorate gave me something more methodological, of course, and Schwerpunkt wouldn't be what it is without that. But overall, like, what I learned through Schwerpunkt, I think gives me an edge that really, even in comparison to my colleagues on certain topics, is really amazing. Because they are hyper-specializing. They entered that phase. I'm also doing that, but because I'm writing essentially just about my PhD topic now, all the various articles, and I can't do it until I die, as most scholars. But Schwerpunkt actually gives me much more in the process and doesn't make me sclerotized. It makes me active, makes me more lucid, it makes me more, I speak English every day. And it helps a lot, right? So if this was so useful to me, even apparently by losing like the time, I think it can be equally useful in a good, or at least in a good measure for the same people who listen to it, right? So again, it's a long-term investment. I think the benefits are to be recognized after, if you're especially a daily follower, after a couple of months really of regular following, but over the years, surely. And you can be sure also that I'm here, unless I die or I get ill and I can't speak or things like that. Some other terrible things occur, whatever. But my plan is to go on, and that's the thing, right? And so it's an investment for you as well to bet on Schwerpunkt as a horse, right? I don't know why I used this thing, but when you have to turn the tide, the wildes Heer, and Valkyrie is right, maybe it's more evocative in a sense. By the way, yes, I inserted a picture in the thumbnail from General Armstead charging at Gettysburg during Pickett's charge. But let's say there is nothing political in it. I will talk about the American Civil War at some point if you're interested, given that I know that you're mostly from the U.S. and that's an idea. I have plenty of, in fact, American military history stuff that I can discuss easily, and it could be a start. I haven't started talking about the modern era and the contemporary era because, at least, in part, of course, modern warfare a little bit, even contemporary warfare, but I don't talk in general about history and the later centuries, but I could as well. So there is really an enormous, infinite amount of content, and if you want this, you just have to stick around and maybe contributing in that measure. Again, I don't want the money. I don't care about them. In part, I'm going to make them anyway, but it's not just my goal, right? It's not my first thing. I'm lucky enough not to need that, and that's also part of the reason why I can't do Schwerpunkt in many ways. So I'm still investing my time and my work and my energy. So just to those people who think that you're privileged, so that's a terrible thing, you should give us your money. No, right? I will not give you anything. And just that's for the leftists that are listening. But if they follow, they're okay, right? I accept anyone as long as there is in fact, a unitary principle of participation and understanding, and we all see the point of this all, right? But don't think that doesn't happen even among the alt-righters or anything. That, unfortunately, it's become, it's part of the, like this. I mean, it's part of this times, and we have to understand it too. But if I have more, why shouldn't I contribute more? That's how I see it, right? And that's my entire point. And because contributing more makes you more powerful and more capable. That's the only reason why you would like to do it in the first place, right? And that's why being lazy is really not a good indicator, even of what you can actually do in the first place, because you don't know that, or you can't, or you decided that you can't, which is even worse. However, for today, I stop it here. For any question, you can always ask. I don't get many. I know that I've seen during this summer, after the full summer after COVID restrictions, lots of you have gone on vacation. I see this thing seasonally, right? Some of you now are coming back to work, but this autumn, interesting things are gonna happen. Interesting, that doesn't necessarily mean good things, but also good things and as bad things. But Schwerpunkt wise, I in a couple of weeks we get into, in 3 weeks we get into autumn as well. So there is the inferic rays of the sun towards the darkness, and so that we'll have to mount up, and that's where the hormones are kicking in, and will become more aggressive and wolf-like, and this thing will be leading the wildes Heer towards the rebirth of the light, right at the end of the tunnel. And so that's where we have a great expansionistic capacity eventually to consolidate throughout all the winter and spring, etc. And so I count on a major rise that I've been observing through the stats. And so for today, I just hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. And for now, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.